The warning alarms blared across the bridge of the Alliance battlecruiser Defiance. Captain Peter Collins gripped the arms of his command chair as another volley of enemy fire rocked the ship. Through the main viewport, the space around Helios Prime was filled with the crystalline ships of the Vordax fleet. Their purple-hued weapons tore through the remaining Alliance defense satellites. "Shield status," Peter demanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. Lieutenant Susan Miller worked frantically at her station. Her fingers flew across the control panel as she rerouted power. "Shields at 28%, Captain. We can't." "Take another direct hit." Peter surveyed the tactical display floating in the center of the bridge. The blue dots representing Alliance ships were disappearing one by one. Red dots of Vordax vessels moved in perfect formation, surrounding the planet like hungry predators. The situation was beyond grim. It was hopeless. "Status of the evacuation transports?" Peter asked. Communications Officer Greg Bailey shook his head. His young face was smeared with sweat and grime from a panel explosion earlier. 3 transport groups have jumped to safety. 2 more are still loading civilians. They need another 30 minutes minimum. Peter knew they didn't have 30 minutes. The Vordax were not known for patience or mercy. In the 3 years since they first appeared at the edge of Allied space, the crystalline aliens had conquered 12 systems. They left nothing behind but stripped planets and broken ships. "All power to forward shields," Peter ordered. "Plot an intercept course with that command vessel. We'll buy the transport some time." The bridge crew exchanged quick glances. They understood what this meant. None of them objected. Navigator Ellen King nodded solemnly. "Course plotted, Captain. Intercept in 6 minutes." Outside the viewports, Peter could see the planet Helios Prime. Its blue-green surface was marred by spreading black patches, where Vordax ground forces had begun their attack. The capital city's protective dome had failed 2 hours ago. Now columns of smoke rose from what had been a shining example of Alliance architecture and culture. The Defiance shuddered as another blast struck its weakening shields. "Captain," Susan called out, "I'm detecting unusual readings from the far side of the moon." Peter frowned. "Vordax reinforcements?" "No, sir. The energy signature doesn't match Vordax technology. I've never seen anything like it." Before Peter could respond, 3 Vordax destroyers moved to block the Defiance's path. Their crystalline hulls glinted in the light of Helios Prime's sun. "Evasive maneuvers," Peter ordered. The Defiance rolled sharply, avoiding the first volley of enemy fire. The ship's engine strained as Ellen pushed them beyond safety limits. They wouldn't last long at this output, but that hardly mattered now. "Weapons, target the lead destroyer," Peter commanded. "Fire everything we have." Weapons Officer Joe Reeves didn't hesitate. Firing main cannons and missile batteries, the Defiance unleashed its arsenal. Energy beams and missiles streaked toward the lead Vordax ship. The destroyer's shields flared, bright purple as they absorbed most of the attack. A few missiles penetrated, causing minor damage to its hull. "Minimal effect, Captain," Joe reported grimly. "Their shields are still at 80%. Peter had expected this. Alliance weapons had proven largely ineffective against Vordax technology from the beginning of the war. It was like throwing stones at a battleship. The tactical display updated, showing civilian transport ships rising from the planet's surface. They were packed with refugees, the last free citizens of Helios Prime. If these ships were destroyed, an entire culture would vanish. 5 billion people called this planet home. Only a few million would escape. "They're targeting the transports," Susan warned, her voice tight with anger. Peter made a quick decision. "Change course. Put us between the Vordax and those transports." Ellen adjusted their heading immediately. The Defiance turned sharply, engines blazing as they raced to intercept the Vordax attack force. "Open a channel to Alliance Command," Peter ordered. Greg worked his console. "Channel open, sir. But there's heavy interference. I don't know if they'll receive our transmission." Peter leaned forward. "This is Captain Peter Collins of the Alliance cruiser Defiance. Helios Prime has fallen. I repeat, Helios Prime has fallen. We are covering the evacuation of civilians, but our forces are overwhelmed. The Vordax fleet numbers over 300 vessels. He paused, then added, "If anyone receives this message, the coordinates for the civilian refugee fleet are attached. They will need protection." Another hit rocked the ship. The lights flickered and emergency systems activated. "Shields at 12%, Susan reported. "Hull breaches on decks 9 through 11. "Seal those sections," Peter ordered. "Evacuate all personnel to inner compartments." The Defiants shuddered again as they took fire from multiple directions. On the tactical display, Peter could see they had succeeded in drawing attention away from the transports. The last civilian ships were now clearing the atmosphere. "Sir," Susan called out suddenly, "that strange energy reading I detected earlier, it's growing stronger. And now I'm picking up hundreds of similar signatures." Peter turned to her station. "Show me." Susan transferred the readings to the main display. Even Peter, with his 20 years of Alliance service, had never seen energy patterns like these. They pulsed and shifted in ways that defied standard detection algorithms. "Could it be a sensor malfunction?" he asked. "I've run 3 diagnostic checks," Susan replied. "These readings are real." Suddenly, space itself seemed to tear open. A kilometer-wide rift appeared near the moon, glowing with blue-white energy. Through this impossible opening came a ship, sleek and dark with red striping along its hull. It was smaller than Alliance battleships, but radiated power in a way that made the hair on Peter's neck stand up. Then another rift opened, and another. Within moments, dozens of tiers in space appeared around Helios Prime. From each emerged similar vessels of various sizes. "What in the stars?" Ellen whispered. The largest of the unknown ships, easily the size of an Alliance carrier, moved into position directly opposite the Vordax command vessel. For a moment, everything seemed to pause as the newcomers arranged themselves in a perfect defensive formation around the remaining Alliance ships and the fleeing transports. A transmission cut through all communication channels, bypassing encryption and security protocols as if they didn't exist. "This is Admiral Diane Howard of the United Earth Defense Force to all vessels in the Helios Prime system. Alliance ships, move your civilian transports behind our defensive line. Vordax forces, you are ordered to cease hostilities immediately and withdraw from this system." The bridge of the Defiance fell completely silent. Earth? The primitive world under non-interference directives? How had they developed jump technology? How had they built a fleet? "Sir," Greg said finally, breaking the stunned silence. "The lead Earth vessel is hailing us directly." Peter straightened his uniform, suddenly aware of how disheveled he must look after hours of battle. On screen, the image of a woman in a dark blue uniform appeared. Her hair was silver gray, cut short in a practical style. Her face showed age and experience, but her eyes were sharp and evaluating. "Captain Collins," Admiral Howard said, "get your damaged vessels and those transports to these coordinates." Data streamed to their navigation system. "We'll handle the Vordax." Peter found his voice. "Admiral, the Vordax fleet outnumbers you. Their shields are resistant to our strongest weapons." For the first time, the Admiral's stern expression softened into something resembling a smile. "Yes, Captain. We know exactly what we're facing. Now move your people to safety. Earth has entered the fight." The Vordax responded to Admiral Howard's ultimatum with a barrage of weapons fire. Streams of purple energy lanced toward the Earth vessels. Captain Peter Collins held his breath as he watched from the bridge of the Defiance. He expected to see the newcomers shattered by the overwhelming firepower that had decimated Alliance fleets for 3 years. What happened instead defied explanation. The Earth ships made no attempt to evade. The energy weapons struck their hulls directly, and then something remarkable occurred. The impact seemed to spread across the surface of each vessel, the purple energy dispersing like water on a hot pan. Within seconds, the ship's hulls glowed, with the same purple hue as the Vordax weapons. "They're absorbing the energy," Susan Miller said in disbelief, her eyes fixed on the sensor readings. "No, wait. They're redirecting it through their hull systems." Peter leaned forward. "Are you saying their shields—" "They don't appear to be using shields at all, Captain," Susan interrupted, her voice filled with wonder. "At least not in any way we understand them." The largest Earth vessel, which Admiral Howard had identified as the Invincible, pulsed with the absorbed energy. Then, with startling suddenness, it released the power back toward the Vordax command ship, transformed into a focused beam of blinding white light. The beam struck the crystalline hull of the Vordax vessel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then cracks spread across its surface like ice breaking on a spring lake. Seconds later, the command ship shattered into thousands of glittering fragments. "Navigation," Peter ordered, finding his voice again. "Get us to those coordinates the Admiral provided. All surviving Alliance vessels form up around the civilian transports." As the Defiance limped away from the battle zone, Peter couldn't tear his eyes from the tactical display. The Earth fleet moved, with a precision he had never witnessed before. Their smaller vessels, fighters he assumed, darted between the larger Vordax ships with impossible agility. They seemed to predict the enemy's movements before they happened. "Sir," Greg Bailey called from communications, "we're receiving a priority message from Alliance High Command." "Put it through," Peter replied. The worn face of Admiral John Winters appeared on screen. His uniform was disheveled, and the command center behind him flickered with emergency lighting. "Collins," Winters said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "What in blazes is happening at Helios Prime? Our long-range sensors show energy signatures unlike anything we've ever seen." "Sir," Peter responded, "Earth has entered the war." "Admiral," Winters stared in disbelief. "Earth? That can't be possible. They're a pre-contact civilization under non-interference directives." "With all due respect, sir," Peter said, gesturing to the battle unfolding behind them, "they very much are not." Before Winters could respond, Susan called out from her station. "Captain, the Vordax are changing formation. They're concentrating their forces against the Earth flagship." Peter turned back to the viewport. Over 100 Vordax vessels now surrounded the Invincible, their weapons creating a web of purple energy directed at the Earthship. The Invincible's hull absorbed the first wave of attacks, but the second and third came too quickly. Peter saw sections of the ship's outer hull begin to buckle under the assault. Then something unexpected happened again. The Earth vessel seemed to shimmer, and suddenly there were brief flashes of blue light all around it. Where each flash appeared, an Earth fighter emerged, as if from nowhere. "Short-range jumps," Susan whispered. "They're jumping their fighters directly from launch bays into combat positions." The fighters immediately engaged the Vordax ships, drawing fire away from the Invincible. The Earth flagship used this moment to perform its own short-range jump, repositioning to the rear of the Vordax formation. Once there, it launched what appeared to be missiles, small, sleek projectiles that moved too fast for normal tracking. When the projectiles struck the Vordax ships, they didn't explode. Instead, they seemed to phase through the crystal hulls. "What are those weapons?" Peter asked, unable to contain his curiosity despite their retreat. Susan studied her readings. They appeared to be some kind of phase-shifted munitions. They're bypassing the Vordax shields entirely and detonating inside their vessels. One by one, the Vordax ships began to explode from within, their beautiful crystal structures shattering into clouds of glittering dust. The Defiance reached the coordinates, provided by Admiral Howard. 5 other damaged Alliance vessels had already gathered there, along with the civilian transport ships. They formed a loose defensive circle, though Peter suspected their protection was now unnecessary. A small Earth vessel approached their position. Unlike the warships engaged with the Vordax, this one appeared to be a diplomatic craft. It was sleek and silver with the words, "Earth Diplomatic Corps," written in multiple languages along its hull. "They're requesting permission to dock, Captain," Greg reported. Peter straightened his uniform. "Grant permission. Alert security to prepare a welcome for our unexpected allies." The Earthship docked with practiced ease. Peter and a small reception team waited at the airlock. When the doors slid open, a woman in a formal gray uniform stepped through. She appeared to be in her 50s with short brown hair and intelligent eyes that took in every detail of the Alliance vessel. "Captain Collins," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Ambassador Linda Martinez of Earth. I believe we have much to discuss." Peter shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip. "Indeed we do, Ambassador. starting with how Earth managed to hide its true capabilities from the Alliance for so long. Ambassador Martinez smiled. Perhaps we should move to your conference room. This will be a rather lengthy explanation. As they walked through the corridors of the Defiance, Peter noticed the Earth diplomat studying the Alliance technology with polite but unmistakable disinterest. It was the look of someone examining primitive tools. In the conference room, senior officers gathered around the table. Ambassador Martinez activated a small device that projected a holographic display of Earth above the center of the table. For 70 years, she began, your alliance has maintained a non-interference directive around our solar system. Your observers monitored our television broadcasts, analyzed our internet communications, and watched our seemingly slow progress into space. The hologram shifted to show what appeared to be ordinary Earth cities and early space stations, exactly what Alliance intelligence had reported for decades. What you were seeing, Martinez continued, was exactly what we wanted you to see. The hologram changed again, revealing massive underground facilities and lunar bases hidden on the far side of Earth's moon. Shipyards that dwarfed anything the Alliance had built orbited Jupiter and Saturn, concealed by the gas giants' radiation fields. 70 years ago, one of your survey ships was careless. We detected it, tracked it, and captured enough of its transmissions to understand what we were dealing with. The government leaders of that time made a crucial decision. We would appear primitive while building in secret. Peter leaned forward. But why? The Alliance would have welcomed Earth's membership. Ambassador Martinez's expression hardened slightly. Would you, as equals? Or would we have been subjected to your cultural integration programs, required to abandon our aggressive tendencies, asked to disarm our militaries as a condition of membership? The Alliance officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. The truth was, Earth's assessment was accurate. Those would have been the exact conditions for membership. We chose our own path, Martinez said. And now the Alliance needs us more than we ever needed you. Outside the viewport, another Vordax cruiser exploded as Earth fighters executed a perfectly coordinated attack. The battle for Helios Prime was already turning, and Peter Collins knew that nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. While Ambassador Martinez continued her explanation aboard the Defiance, Admiral Diane Howard directed the battle from the bridge of the Invincible. Her experienced eyes tracked the tactical display where human vessels systematically dismantled the once feared Vordax fleet. Status report, Diane ordered, her voice calm despite the chaos of battle. Tactical Officer Kyle Bennett responded immediately. 23 Vordax capital ships destroyed, 47 disabled. Our losses stand at 4 fighters and minor damage to 6 cruisers. No casualties reported yet. No casualties. Diane allowed herself a small smile. The adaptive armor systems were performing even better than expected in actual combat. Years of preparation were paying off. The Vordax command structure is in disarray, Kyle continued. They're breaking formation and attempting individual attacks rather than coordinated efforts. They've never faced defeat before, Diane observed. They don't know how to respond to it. Lieutenant Ben Morris looked up from his communications station. Admiral, the Vordax are broadcasting on all frequencies. Should I put it through? Diane nodded. Let's hear what they have to say. The main screen filled with the image of a Vordax commander. The crystalline beings had no faces as humans understood them. Only complex patterns of light that pulsed and shifted within their transparent bodies. The translator systems converted these patterns into speech. Unknown aggressors, the Vordax message began. You interfere in matters beyond your understanding. This system falls under Vordax claim by right of superior strength. Withdraw now or face complete annihilation. Kyle snorted. They're still making threats while we're destroying their fleet. They've never known anything else, Diane replied. Open a channel. Ben complied and Diane stood straighter as the camera focused on her. Vordax command, this is Admiral Diane Howard of Earth. You entered Alliance territory without provocation. You have attacked civilian populations and committed what we classify as war crimes. We will not withdraw. You have 1 hour to surrender all forces and prepare for peace negotiations, or we will destroy every Vordax vessel in this system. She nodded and Ben cut the transmission. You think they'll surrender? Kyle asked. Diane shook her head. No, but it's important to offer the option. That's something the Alliance would do. She turned to her executive officer. Commander Frank Harris, prepare all ships for final assault. Phase 2 weapons are now authorized. Frank nodded grimly and began issuing orders to the fleet. The Vordax response came 15 minutes later, not in words but in actions. Their remaining ships formed a new pattern, linking their energy systems together in what Alliance intelligence had identified as preparation for a system-wide electromagnetic pulse, a tactic that had disabled Alliance fleets in previous battles. They're charging for an EMP strike, Kyle reported. Energy readings are climbing rapidly. Exactly as expected, Diane said calmly. All ships, switch to isolated power configuration Alpha. Deploy countermeasure drones. Throughout the human fleet, systems shifted to a protected state specifically designed to withstand Vordax electromagnetic attacks. Small drones launched from each vessel, forming a network around the fleet. When the Vordax released their pulse, a wave of energy that spread across the battlefield like a ripple in a pond, the drones activated. They created a counterfield that not only protected the Earth vessels, but reflected the energy back toward its source. The Vordax ships, unprepared for their own weapon to be turned against them, suffered immediate system failures. Lights flickered across their crystalline hulls as critical systems shut down. Now, Diane ordered. All ships execute attack pattern Epsilon. The Earth fleet moved as one, surrounding the disabled Vordax vessels. Precision strikes targeted propulsion systems and weapons arrays, rendering the enemy ships powerless without destroying them completely. Within 10 minutes, the battle for Helios Prime was effectively over. The remaining Vordax vessels hung dead in space, their crews trapped inside. Secure the captured vessels, Diane instructed. Prepare boarding teams. I want their navigation data and any intelligence we can gather about their homeworld. As the bridge crew carried out her orders, Diane received a private message from Earth. President Laura Garcia's face appeared on her personal display. Admiral, congratulations on your victory, the president said. The Alliance Council has requested an emergency meeting. Ambassador Martinez has already begun preliminary discussions. They'll have questions, Diane noted. Many, Laura agreed with a slight smile. And we've prepared answers for decades. How goes the ground situation on Helios Prime? Diane switched her display to show the planet's surface. Major Samantha Jones has established 3 secure zones around the main population centers. The Vordax ground forces are more difficult than their fleet. They fight to the death and have no concept of surrender. Casualties? Minimal on our side. The powered armor gives our troops a significant advantage, but civilian losses were high before we arrived. Preliminary estimates suggest 30% of the planet's population did not survive the initial attack. The president's expression grew solemn. A tragedy, but without our intervention, it would have been total extinction. Proceed with the recovery operation as planned. I'll handle the political situation with the Alliance. Yes, Madam President. Back on the Defiance, Captain Peter Collins was still trying to process everything Ambassador Martinez had revealed. The history of Earth's secret development was astonishing. So when our observers reported that Earth was struggling with climate change and resource shortages, he said, "You were actually expanding throughout your solar system," Linda Martinez finished for him. The climate crisis was partly real and partly theater. It gave us the perfect excuse to develop advanced energy systems and material science without raising suspicion. While your observers watched our public space agencies take small steps with chemical rockets, our actual military and scientific vessels were already exploring neighboring star systems. Susan Miller, who had joined the meeting, shook her head in disbelief. But the Alliance monitoring stations around your system, surely they would have detected your ships leaving. Linda smiled. Your monitoring technology relies on detecting conventional engine signatures and jump points. Our propulsion systems work differently. We don't create jump points. We slip between the fabric of space itself. That's impossible, Lieutenant Ellen King protested. The energy requirements alone would be beyond Alliance science, Linda said gently. Yes, just as your ancestors would have found nuclear power impossible. Science evolves, Lieutenant. Peter leaned forward. What I don't understand is why reveal yourselves now. You could have remained hidden, safe in your solar system. Ambassador Martinez's expression turned serious. We've been monitoring the Vordax advance for 15 years. Our deep space surveillance network extends far beyond what you might imagine. We knew this war was coming before the Alliance did. And you did nothing? Peter asked, unable to keep the accusation from his voice. We did everything. Linda corrected him. We built our fleet. We studied Vordax technology and developed countermeasures. We prepared for this day. But humanity follows one principle above all others. We prepare for the worst but hope for the best. We wanted the Alliance to succeed on its own terms. She gestured to the viewport, where Earth ships were now towing damaged Alliance vessels toward a repair formation. But we also prepared for the day you might fail, she added. Today was that day. A communication officer interrupted with an urgent message. Captain Collins, Admiral Howard requests your presence aboard the Invincible. She's convening a war council with all surviving Alliance commanders. Peter stood. Please inform the Admiral I'll be there shortly. He turned to Ambassador Martinez. I assume you'll be joining me? Linda nodded. Of course, this is just the beginning, Captain. The Vordax will regroup. They've never faced defeat before, which makes them unpredictable and dangerous. What happens now? Peter asked as they headed toward the shuttle bay. Now, Linda replied, humanity joins the galactic community, but not as junior partners or as students. We come as teachers. Our history is filled with wars and conflicts your species have never known. Where the Alliance sees battle as a regrettable necessity, we see it as an art form we've perfected over thousands of years. The shuttle departed the Defiance, flying toward the massive Earth flagship. Around them, the combined fleet of Earth and Alliance vessels orbited Helios Prime, a new force in the galaxy that the Vordax had never anticipated. The War Council aboard the Invincible brought together the surviving Alliance commanders and Earth's military leadership. Captain Peter Collins felt out of place among the high-ranking officers, but Admiral Howard had specifically requested his presence due to his first-hand experience with Vordax tactics. The conference room was unlike anything in Alliance vessels. Instead of a traditional table with chairs, it featured a circular platform where three-dimensional holograms created an immersive tactical display. The officers stood within the display, surrounded by real-time battle data. Admiral Howard took her position at the center of the platform. Welcome to the first Joint Alliance-Earth strategic meeting. The battle for Helios Prime is won, but the war is far from over. She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show the wider galactic map. Red markers indicated Vordax-controlled systems, while blue showed Alliance territory. A disturbing number of previously blue systems now glowed red. The Vordax controlled 28 former Alliance systems, Howard continued. Intelligence gathered from captured vessels confirms our suspicions. They intend to continue their expansion until they've conquered the entire galactic arm. High Commander Eli Ward of the Alliance forces frowned at the display. The elderly officer had arrived via emergency jump just hours after the battle. His weathered face showed both fatigue and skepticism. Admiral Howard, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. While we appreciate Earth's intervention at Helios Prime, I must question your overall assessment. The Alliance has studied the Vordax for 3 years. Their pattern suggests they will consolidate their gains before advancing further. Kyle Bennett, the tactical officer from the Invincible, stepped forward. With respect, Commander, your intelligence is incomplete. He adjusted the display to show a new layer of data. Shipping routes, communication patterns, and resource movements within Vordax territory. This information was far more detailed than anything the Alliance had gathered. Earth's deep space monitoring network has been tracking the Vordax for 15 years, Kyle explained. Their strategy is clear. They establish forward bases, then launch simultaneous attacks across multiple fronts. They're preparing for their next offensive here, and here. He highlighted 3 Alliance systems near the current front. Commander Ward's expression darkened. 15 years? You knew about this threat for 12 years before they even attacked the Alliance, and you said nothing? Ambassador Martinez stepped smoothly into the conversation. Commander, Earth was classified as a pre-contact civilization under your own directive. Any attempt to warn you would have exposed our true capabilities and violated your non-interference protocols. So you watched worlds burn because of a technicality? Another Alliance officer demanded. The tension in the room rose instantly. Peter noticed several Earth officers stiffen, their faces showing controlled anger. Admiral Howard raised her hand, silencing the brewing argument. What's done is done. We are here now, and we offer not just our fleet, but our knowledge and technology. The question is simple. Will the Alliance accept our help as equals? Or would you prefer we withdraw our forces? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Commander Ward looked around at his fellow Alliance officers, then at the display, showing the overwhelming Vordax advance. We would be fools to refuse, he finally admitted. But the Alliance Council will have questions. Many questions. As they should, Howard agreed. Now, let's focus on the immediate situation. Major Jones, report on the ground operations at Helios Prime. A holographic communication link opened, showing a woman in mud-splattered combat armor. Behind her, Earth soldiers in powered exoskeletons worked to clear rubble from what had been a city center. Admiral, we've secured the 3 main population zones, Major Samantha Jones reported. Vordax ground forces have been pushed back to the northern continent. They're fighting to the last soldier as expected. Civilian casualties were heavy before our arrival, approximately 2 billion dead. A collective gasp came from the Alliance. Officers. The scope of the tragedy was difficult to comprehend. Survivors are being treated by our medical teams, Jones continued. We've established field hospitals in the secure zones. The Vordax used some kind of crystalline toxin in the water supply that our medics are still analyzing. Biological warfare, Commander Ward muttered. They've never used that before. They adapt, Howard said simply. As do we. Major, continue the operation as planned. We'll send additional support teams. The meeting continued for hours as they discussed strategy, shared intelligence, and began the difficult process of integrating 2 very different military cultures. Throughout the discussions, Peter observed the Earth officers. They were confident without being arrogant, precise in their assessments, and most strikingly, completely unsurprised by anything the Vordax had done. When the meeting finally ended, Peter found himself walking alongside Admiral Howard toward the ship's observation deck. You have questions, Captain Collins, she said. It wasn't a question. Peter nodded. Many, but one stands out. How did Earth become so prepared for war? The Alliance has worked for centuries to move beyond military conflict. We thought it was the natural evolution of advanced civilizations. Howard smiled faintly. A noble goal. But humanity's history taught us different lessons. They reached the observation deck, a vast chamber with transparent walls that offered a panoramic view of space. Helios Prime hung below them, beautiful despite the visible scars of battle on its surface. Earth has known war since our earliest civilizations, Howard explained. While your species were evolving toward cooperation, ours was locked in an endless cycle of conflict. We fought over resources, territory, ideology, religion, sometimes for reasons even we couldn't fully explain. She turned to face him directly. We tried peace many times. It never lasted. Eventually, we accepted that preparedness for war was the only certain path to survival. That sounds like a bleak existence, Peter observed. It would be, if that were the whole story, Howard agreed. But humans are complex. The same drive that makes us fearsome warriors also makes us passionate creators. The same ingenuity that builds weapons also builds wonders. We learn to channel our nature rather than deny it. Outside the viewport, Earth vessels worked alongside Alliance ships to create a defensive perimeter around the system. The 2 fleets were starkly different in design philosophy. Alliance ships were elegant and artistic, while Earth vessels were sleek and functional. The Alliance banned weapons development after the mechanical wars, Peter said. We chose peace. And we respect that choice, Howard replied. But the galaxy contains species like the Vordax who understand only strength. Sometimes, Captain, peace must be enforced before it can be enjoyed. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication. Admiral, we're detecting multiple jump signatures at the edge of the system. Vordax reinforcements, at least 500 vessels. Howard's expression didn't change. Inform all Earth and Alliance commanders. Battle stations. Captain Collins, would you care to observe how humanity wages war when we're properly prepared? Peter straightened his back. I would be honored, Admiral. As alarms sounded throughout the fleet, Peter realized that the galaxy had forever changed. The Vordax had believed they were invincible. The Alliance had believed warfare was behind them. Both had been wrong. And humanity, the species everyone had underestimated, was about to demonstrate why that had been a fatal mistake. The Vordax reinforcements emerged from jump points in perfect formation. 500 ships arranged in attack clusters, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the light of Helios Prime's sun. It was the largest Vordax fleet ever assembled in one location, a force that would have overwhelmed the entire Alliance Navy at full strength. On the bridge of the Invincible, Admiral Diane Howard studied the enemy formation with calm interest. Captain Peter Collins stood beside her, trying to hide his concern at the overwhelming numbers they faced. They've adapted their formation, Diane noted. They've placed their command vessels in the center rather than at the rear. They learned from our previous attack. Peter glanced at the tactical display. The combined Earth Alliance fleet numbered just over 200 ships. They were outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Admiral, he began carefully, perhaps we should consider a strategic withdrawal. We could gather more forces. No, Diane said firmly. The Vordax must learn here and now that humanity will not retreat. She turned to her communications officer. Ben, open a channel to all Earth and Alliance vessels. When the channel was open, she spoke clearly and confidently. All ships, this is Admiral Howard. The enemy before us represents the largest Vordax force ever assembled. They expect us to retreat. They expect us to fear their numbers. They are about to learn why Earth has survived thousands of years of warfare. She nodded to her tactical officer. Kyle, initiate Operation Sunburst. Throughout the Earth fleet, hidden weapon systems came online. The vessels that had seemed merely impressive in the earlier battle now revealed their true capabilities. What's happening? Peter asked, watching as the Earthships began to emit a strange energy field. Phase 2, Diane replied. What you saw earlier was just our standard combat mode. This is what we reserved for a full-scale engagement. The Vordax launched. Their attack, hundreds of ships accelerating toward the Earth Alliance fleet, their weapons charged, preparing to unleash a devastating barrage. But before they could fire, the space between the two fleets shimmered. The stars themselves seemed to bend and distort. Fold space technology, Diane explained to Peter. We're creating a localized distortion in the fabric of space-time. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The front line of Vordax vessels suddenly found themselves moving at drastically reduced speeds, as if trapped in invisible molasses. Their weapons fire, when it finally came, moved so slowly that Earth fighters easily dodged the energy beams. We can't maintain the field for long, Diane continued. Energy costs are exponential, but we don't need long. She turned to her weapons officer. Frank, deploy graviton charges. From the Earth battleships came a new type of weapon. Small spherical devices that moved through the distorted space unaffected by the field. They attached themselves to the hulls of the slowed Vordax ships. Once in position, the devices activated. Localized gravity wells formed around each affected Vordax vessel, crushing their crystalline structures with forces equivalent to those found near a neutron star. Ships cracked and imploded one after another, turned into clouds of glittering dust by forces they had no defense against. In less than 5 minutes, a third of the Vordax fleet was destroyed. The space distortion field collapsed as Earth ships diverted power to their defensive systems. The remaining Vordax vessels, now free of the spatial effect, regrouped and changed tactics. Instead of a direct assault, they split into smaller attack groups, attempting to surround the Earth Alliance fleet. They're adapting again, Kyle noted. Impressive. Diane nodded. As expected. Phase 3, Kyle. The Earth fleet suddenly split apart, individual vessels performing short-range jumps to create their own encirclement of the Vordax forces. From these positions they launched what appeared to be small satellites. The satellites activated, creating a web of energy beams between them. Where these beams intersected with Vordax ships, the crystalline material began to resonate at its atomic frequency. Entire vessels vibrated uncontrollably, their structures failing as the resonance shattered molecular bonds. Peter watched in astonishment as another 100 Vordax ships disintegrated. You're not fighting with conventional weapons at all, he realized. You're using the fundamental laws of physics as your weapons. Conventional weapons are easy to defend against, Diane replied. You build stronger shields, thicker armor, but the laws of physics apply to everyone equally. We simply found ways to use them more effectively. The battle continued for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. Earth's technologies were so far beyond what the Vordax had encountered that they had no effective countermeasures. When the last enemy vessel was disabled, Admiral Howard ordered an immediate rescue operation to capture Vordax crew members alive. We need intelligence, she explained to Peter, and we need to understand their psychology if we're ever going to end this war permanently. 3 days later, representatives from all Alliance worlds gathered in the central chamber of the Helios, prime capital city. The building had been quickly repaired by Earth engineering teams, its grand dome now a symbol of resilience and cooperation. President Laura Garcia of Earth addressed the gathering via holographic projection. Her image stood in the center of the chamber, lifelike and commanding despite being transmitted from millions of kilometers away. For too long, Earth watched from the shadows as the galaxy changed around us, she began. We chose isolation while we built our strength, unsure if we would find friends or enemies among the stars. She looked around at the gathered delegates, making eye contact with each as if she were truly present. Today, that isolation ends. Earth extends its hand in friendship to the Alliance, offering not just our military protection but our scientific knowledge, our cultural diversity, and our unique perspective. Alliance High Counselor Eli Ward stepped forward. The elderly diplomat had spent decades shaping Alliance policy, including the non-interference directive that had kept Earth isolated. President Garcia, he said formally, the Alliance acknowledges and thanks Earth for its intervention at Helios Prime. Without your fleet, this system and perhaps our entire civilization would have fallen to the Vordax. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. However, I must ask, why should we trust a species that deceived us for 70 years? A species whose first major interaction with the galactic community was an act of war, however justified. Laura Garcia smiled gently. Because, Counselor, we could have let you fall. We could have waited until the Alliance was gone, then dealt with the Vordax on our terms. Instead, we chose to save billions of lives at the risk of exposing ourselves before we were ready. She gestured to the rebuilt chamber around them. We choose to build rather than destroy. We choose to heal rather than harm. Yes, humanity excels at warfare. Our history forced that excellence upon us. But our true strength lies in what we do after the fighting stops. Throughout the gathered delegates, a murmur of agreement spread. Even Ward seemed moved by her words. The Alliance accepts Earth's friendship, he declared formally. Together, we will rebuild what the Vordax destroyed and create a new era of peace, one protected by strength rather than wishful thinking. As the meeting continued, Captain Peter Collins stood with Admiral Howard and Ambassador Martinez at the back of the chamber. Will it work? Peter asked quietly. This alliance between such different approaches to the galaxy? Diane Howard looked at the delegates now engaged in animated discussions about joint defense systems and technology exchanges. It has to work, she said. The Vordax are just the beginning. There are other threats in the darkness between stars, threats neither of us could face alone. Linda Martinez smiled. Humanity learned long ago that our greatest achievements come not despite our differences, but because of them. The Alliance brings wisdom, patience, and a vision of peace. Earth brings innovation, determination, and the will to defend that peace at any cost. She looked out through the dome at the stars above, where Earth and Alliance ships patrolled together. No one was supposed to come when the Vordax attacked, she said softly. But humanity did. And now, neither of us will ever stand alone again.